So, what do you think about the verdict? Okay, so this is my opinion. So far, a lot of people have been really watching and observing this trial, the Chauvin versus George Floyd, or George Floyd versus Chauvin trial, however you want to put it. And I would say George Floyd versus Chauvin. And correct me if I'm mispronouncing that name. So here, out of the Associated Press, it says there's one verdict, and since that one verdict has been read, and they're not even finished, really finished and finalized with everything just yet, because they have to go through a Supreme Court final ruling. There has been 6 police killings across America in 24 hours. Okay. One verdict, then 6 police killings across America in 24 hours. So, what does that say to you? There is backlash. So, there are a lot of unhappy people and dissatisfied people with the verdict that has been read. And so, what that means is there is going to be more racial violence, or violence that is a result of uh, from some hate crime or racial hostility, a social divide on this particular issue, and it opens the floodgates for, yes, I don't even want to say it, but I'm going to say it, race war. And I believe that has always been happening, but it's been brewing. It's there's like small little fires, and every now and then when a trial like, such as the George Floyd Chauvin trial, or like the Rodney King versus LAPD, um, the Watts situation that happened in, I believe it was 64, and all of these little things that we see happening, it adds on and it adds on to the frustration. And then when you get a high profile trial that basically shows all of the people on television, national television, what has been happening all along, that fire begins to basically grow into what is, out of control, and it becomes something really terrible where we don't even want to look at what's about to happen. And it is happening. It's a brewing race war is what this is. And it's we've seen it with the OJ case. We've seen it with the Rodney King case. We've seen it with various cases in the past, and now we have the George Floyd and Chauvin trial. And so there is backlash. And so release the footage. Where's Wooten? The power of the people is stronger than the power of in the power. The people than the people in power. And so here's some still photos, and it's probably going to be various clips of protesters and situations that have been happening all around the country that are a reflection of the violence that has occurred just within the U.S. here. I believe there were still photos, 9 still photos, and so this is really bad, to see all of this happening and unfolding. Like it's like a slow burn is what I want to say before the eruption of something terrible that could be. And so think about it. It's some, what do they say, the perfect storm? Here you got the COVID, a lot of people lost jobs, businesses aren't doing what they would have done had not have been all the disease. You have a lot of uncertainty, you have eviction going on, you have a lot of people who were opening up businesses and they had to abruptly close them. There have been a lot of death. Family members have been really struggling financially. Um, there is also, I would say, possible multiple foreclosures that are on the rise. Even though we have these relief programs, it's uncertain who's going to qualify and who's not going to qualify for those programs. Is it fair to say that? Sometimes we hear, or what I've been hearing, and I'm going to add to this whole slow burn of tension, is that a lot of the landlords have been going under the guise of CDC, where they've been finding loopholes to get people evicted. There have been uh, two-sided stories. You have landlords who are struggling, then you have landlords dealing with bad tenants. The moratorium had been protecting the people who needed it, also the people who didn't really need the protection, or shouldn't have been getting protection or weren't deserving of it, as should I say. Then you have people who lost their jobs and they don't know what they're going to do, and they're burning through their savings. Now you have all of these shootings. You've got mass shootings going on. One just happened with FedEx. One happened in Colorado at a supermarket, and now you have these hate crimes. You had the massage parlor in Georgia, and then you have Dante Wright. You have some other various situations that are going on that have been very, very frustrating, angering, and eye opening as to what is really happening. You know, you have multitude of things going on, and then you have this high profile racialized trial going on. There was accountability but not justice just yet, and so everybody's really on edge. This is a nail biting type of situation where people are wondering, what is the high court's decision going to be on these issues. This right here is pictured the North Carolina deputy shooting. Okay, so there's been lots of shootings, lots of violence that has unfolded um, just within under 24 hours. And so this is a, the brewing, or the simmering, if you would be, of what could happen if people are not satisfied with the outcome of this trial. And already you have people showing how they feel about the verdict. So even as the Derek Chauvin case was fresh in memory, the reading of the verdict in Minneapolis courtroom, the shackling of the former police officer, the jubilation at what many had saw as being justice in the death of George Floyd. Even then, blood flowed on America's streets. Okay, so, and even then, some of that blood was shed at the hands of law enforcement. So at least 6 were fatally shot by officers across the U.S. in the 24 hours after jurors reached a verdict in the murder case against Chauvin on Tuesday. So the roll call of the dead is distressing. Okay, so a 16-year-old girl in Columbus, Ohio, an arrested man in Escondido, California, 42-year-old man in eastern North Carolina. The deaths in some cases sparked new cries for justice, and some said they reflect an urgent need for racial changes to an American policing issue, and the need for the Chauvin verdict cannot paper over. So, for others, the shootings are a tragic reminder of the difficult and dangerous decisions law enforcement face daily. So, an unidentified man in San Antonio, another man killed in the same city within hours of the first, 31-year-old man in central Massachusetts, and the circumstance surrounding each death differ widely. So some happen while officers investigated serious crimes, and police say that some of the people were armed with a gun or a knife or a metal pole, and one man claimed to have a bomb that he had threatened to detonate. And so, in several cases, little is known about the lives of those killed and what had happened in their final moments. And so, the deadly encounters are only a small snapshot of the thousands of interactions between American police officers and civilians every day, most of which end safely, uneventfully. Encounters between the police and the populace, however, are not an issue. It's the very different story when the weapon is drawn and a life is ended. And so, as the nation watched, the judge read the verdict against Chauvin on Tuesday afternoon, and an officer hundreds of miles away was listening over the patrol car radio in a neighborhood of Columbus, Ohio. Minutes earlier, a colleague had fatally shot a girl who was a teenage girl. So police had been called to the house after someone had called 911 and reported being physically threatened. So a body camera footage shows an officer approaching a group of people in a driveway as teenagers Ma'Khia Bryant, excuse me if I mispronounced her name, swings the knife wildly. Moments later, the girl charges at the young woman pinned against the car. The officer fires 4 shots before Bryant slumps to the ground. The black-handled blade, similar to a kitchen or a steak knife, lies on the sidewalk next to her. And so that video surfaced all over the net. And so I basically every now and then I'll interject. So that wasn't in the article, but I did see that video and it was pretty disturbing. So, and she was just a kid, and so I'm wondering why there couldn't have been some other unlethal type of restraint that could have been used beside an actual gun. But in that case, she had a weapon, but that's still, I feel like, no reason for this teenager to have been killed. But you didn't have to shoot her, and so I didn't rehearse this. So this was what I was saying before I read this. So that's probably what the family members were yelling and the friends. You didn't have to shoot her. She's just a kid, man. A man shouted at the officer. So the officer responds, she had a knife. She just went at her. Okay, and so later an anguished neighbor yells at the officers, do you see why Black Lives Matter? Do you get it now? Bryant, who was a in a foster care at the time, was a shy, quiet girl, Bryant, and who liked making her hair and dance videos on TikTok. Her grandmother, Deborah Wilcox, told Associated Press, and her family says that her actions that day were out of character, so I don't know what happened there unless she was fearful for her life, Wilcox said. So though officials have said Bryant's death was a tragedy, and they point to the laws allowing police to use deadly force to protect themselves and others. And so the officers' actions were an act of heroism with a tragic result, said the National Fraternity Order of Police President. Okay, and then he goes on to say yet another demonstration of the impossible situations police face. So this more was looking like it was in the favor of the officer because of the fact that this person was wielding a knife, but the person happened to be a teenager, and it sounds like she was a foster child. About the same time the radio brought the news of the Chauvin verdict to Columbus, two officers in the San Antonio area were confronting a man on a bus, and exactly how the encounter started remains very unclear. But police say that the unidentified man was armed, and it ended with the officers firing fatal shots. And so later that evening in the same city, authorities say a man had killed a person working in a shed outside of his home. So as the officers arrived on the scene, the suspect started shooting at the police, and then they returned fire, killing him. So officials have not released the name of that person. So as the nation digested the news in Minneapolis, and the day worn on, the daily life unspooled. So in the Worcester, Massachusetts, it's Worcester, Massachusetts. The night was punctuated by a standoff of the police that ended in gunfire. So now I may not pronounce the last name correct, but Jovan Von, 31, called 911 and claimed to have a bomb he had threatened to set off. Police said, so officers found him on the street. They said that he was wearing body armor and he had a backpack of what appeared to be a rifle. And so the police SWAT team joined negotiators, and then one reached the Juvan Van by the phone to try to calm him down. Officials say so around midnight. Officials say Javong Vong moved toward the police and the officer opened fire. So Javong Vong was pronounced dead at the scene. So police have not said whether he actually had an explosive device on him. So Javong Vong had run-ins with the police over the years, including a conviction for assault and battery with a deadly weapon or dangerous weapon. But an aunt said that he turned his life around, and the Telegram and Gazette newspaper that had reported it. And so on Thursday, his mother had crumpled onto the street in tears, where flowers had been laid at the site of this person's his killing. So Marie Gonzalez told the newspaper that she had called the police Tuesday night to try to connect with her son, but they wouldn't put her through. So she believed that she could have prevented all of it from happening had they have helped her connect to her son. So they had no right taking my son's life, she said, and they had no right at all. And so the next morning, as people in Minneapolis awakened to the city's boarded up for the unrest that never materialized, a 42-year-old black man in eastern North Carolina was shot and killed when a deputy sheriff tried to serve a drug-related search and arrest warrant on this person. So the eyewitness said that Andrew Brown Jr. was shot dead in his car in Elizabeth City as he had tried to drive away from the scene. So a car authorities removed from the scene appeared to have multiple bullet holes and a shattered back window. His slaying sparked an outcry as hundreds demanded the release of the body camera footage. And so 7 deputies have been placed on leave for this particular incident, which sounds like it's another killing of a black man that could have been prevented from happening. So relatives describe Brown as a doting father who always had a joke to tell, and that he also had a difficult life as well. So his mother was killed when he was very young, and he was partially paralyzed on his right side by an accidental shooting and lost an eye in a stabbing incident, according to his aunt, Glenda Brown Thomas. So he also had troubles with the law, including a misdemeanor of drug possession conviction and some pending felony drug charges. And so the day before he was killed, two arrest warrants were served for him on the drug related charges, including possession with intent to sell cocaine, court records showing. So officers have so far said little about why they fired the shots, but his family is determined to get some answers. So the police didn't have to shoot my baby, said another aunt, Martha McCullen. So doesn't this sound a little familiar? You know, we just heard that in another story before I read this one. So that same morning, police in the Southern California area got a call about something hitting cars with metal, someone that was hitting cars with a metal pole. So the man ran off when the police arrived, but another officer spotted him carrying a 2-foot metal pole in the street. So the white man charged at the officer who ordered him to drop this pole before opening fire, police said. And so police in Escondido near the San Diego have not released the man's name, but did say that he had been arrested nearly 200 times over the past 2 decades for violent assaults on police and the public drug charges and other crimes, of course. And so efforts to get him help from mental health professionals hadn't worked, the police chief said. So this person, according to what's being stated here, he may or may have had some mental issues going on, and that's what happened with that case. So whether any officers will face charges in these shootings remains to be seen. So the Chauvin case was largely he was convicted based on video that showed him pressing his knee into Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes. But police shootings in a heated moment are notoriously difficult to prosecute. Okay, and so juries have generally been reluctant to second guess officers when they claim to have acted in life or death situations. So in the aftermath of the Tuesday verdict, prosecutors on the opposite coast announced opposite decisions on whether to advance charges against law enforcement who killed. So, a Florida prosecutor announced Wednesday that he would not pursue charges against the Brevard County Sheriff's deputy who shot and killed a black teenager, two of them, that is. A California prosecutor announced that manslaughter and assault charges against the deputy in the eastern San Francisco Bay Area in the shooting of an unarmed Filipino man. Okay. So none of these cases have focused attention like the trial that came to a conclusion on Tuesday. So some people hold out hope that Chauvin verdict might be a crucial juncture in the national conversation about race, policing, and the use of force. So we are in a moment of reckoning right now. So said Rachel Rollins, District Attorney for Boston and surrounding communities, and the first woman of color to serve as a top county prosecutor in Massachusetts. So if we can be strategic and come together, she said, we can make profound changes. Profound. And so Associated Press writers Michael Kunzelman in College Park, Maryland, Jill Bleed in Little Rock, Arkansas, Julia Watson in San Diego, and Juliet Williams in San Francisco contributed to the report. And so you can read the rest in your leisure, but it's just an eye-opener to let you know that a lot of things have just within under the 24 hours have occurred, maybe more than just what we see reported here, of course. But it just sheds a lot of light on what has been going on and how people have been feeling about all of these things unraveling. And we still have yet to hear what the high court's decisions are going to be on the George Floyd Chauvin case officially. And so that's the thing. And so we have what I would like to say is I would say not only just the year or a few years of reckoning. I would say this is the decade of reckoning, because no matter what happens on the end of this trial, it's going to be a reflection. Either way it goes, it's going to be a reflection on what has gone on everywhere, in not only just the U.S. but everywhere, based on policing, based on the use of force, based on people's civil liberties, and based on also racial discord in these settings, and the politics behind all of it, and the judicial system, how it operates, and how they come to final conclusions on whether it is something fair or unfair, um, based on media, or based on public opinion, or based on jurors' the final deliberation in a trial. And so that's the thing that we're trying to see. It's really, really got a lot of people on edge. And so when you have a lot of people on edge, what does it cause this to happen? You see constantly in the headlines that you can't get it out of your head. It's there. Even when you step away from it, something new has occurred. It even has paved the way for more violence to just happen and erupt in places you wouldn't even believe violence would occur. You were thinking, okay, this sounds like a sleepy little town, and all of a sudden we hear about these mass shootings happening all over again. And it just seems like it happens out of nowhere in places that you wouldn't even expect it to. And so here in California, I'm on the in the south side of Los Angeles in California. They've been slowly, well, I'll say now that it's not even slow anymore. They've been reopening everything because out here has the lowest numbers of COVID. But I will tell the truth, and this, what we're seeing here is going on, all of the violence. There has been a lot of people that are still out of work, people who are making decisions where they want to work safely, because know that there's these variants floating around out there. People are concerned about. A lot of people have gotten vaccinated, and yet you have still a lot of fear and a lot of misinformation still floating around, um, by way of the internet, and you know communities that are in fear still because of not having a lot of trust in situations like these that we're seeing in the media. It poses a lot of mistrust in governments, and political officials, and a lot of things that have happened thus far. And so people are hinging on, is justice going to be served? We don't have justice. We have accountability. When are we going to see justice at any point in time? And so it's weird. It's like there's this weird calm before the storm. You notice that? So it could go either way, and you still could have violence erupt. And we're already seeing the slow burn or the slow brewing of things happening just with the verdicts being read. And so I'm almost scared to hear what the final conclusion would be. But we're going to have to eventually, we're going to have to absorb that information real soon. And we're going to have to deal with what the outcome brings. So, aside from this, what have I seen? I always like to do this at the end of my videos, and where you stay, what is happening in the community. Well, a lot of eviction. There's been evictions every week. To be real candid, every week I'm seeing U-Haul trucks. I'm seeing people being evicted and moved out, and it's happening in record speed in neighborhoods that are predominantly Black and Hispanic or Latino neighborhoods, where there's furniture, chairs, sofas, all kinds of things being hauled out to the curbside, and you got hauling trucks just constantly moving things each week. There's many apartments that are being cleared out, and it's just sad. And it's like people who just could not, they couldn't. they couldn't make the rent because they didn't qualify for any relief, or maybe they were already behind, and this made it even worse. There's every story's individual and different, different stories, different things going on, but there is a lot of eviction. I will say that there's also foreclosure. That is, they're not talking about this enough, but there's a lot of foreclosure happening, or near, people that are in a house, but they're about to lose their house. A lot of that is in the works, for some. Some may not even be able to come up with back money, mortgage, because they don't know how to access help, or either they access help and it's not enough help. It's just getting them by, for the time being, until they decide where they're going to relocate. So this is what's happening, and a lot of the news may not even be aware of all of the things that are happening, because they're happening so rapidly, and it's a result of the COVID lockdown that had taken place, and then the fear, and it's multiple things that were going on. And so there are a lot of jobs that are available in some areas, but some people won't take them for fear that they're going to be reinfected, or they're going to get infected. They and then there's been a lot of grocery stores that have closed down. There's been a lot here in Southern California. There's been Ralph stores. There's been some grocery stores chains that have closed down. Food for Less, that have closed down because they don't want to pay what is called hero pay. That is for workers who wanted an extra $4 or $5 an hour for the work that they're doing during the COVID pandemic. Um, and so a lot of stuff is going on, and it's really sad. And the schools, even though they're saying that they're open, they're not fully open. They're open, but people are wearing. It's not normal. Let me be honest with you. It's not normal. Kids are spread out. I drove past LASD school where kids were basically outside, and they were spread out, and they were on computers, and they couldn't sit close at all, and they were under tents. They had tents out there. And so I don't know what those shifts are. I don't think that those are all day, because all of the play equipment is yellow taped off. They can't play on the play equipment. Um, I don't believe that's what these kids are doing, because I saw what looked like big barrels where they can throw their lunch after they've eaten it away. And I believe maybe they have half day. Some schools are half day. I don't know that they're all day now. However, there are some schools that are open a little longer. The kids are social distanced in the classroom, and they're spread out, and so it doesn't feel like how school used to be, where everybody's together. And now I'm hearing in the fall, the universities are supposed to have students, if they're to come back, they need to be fully vaccinated, unless they have some kind of medical issue where they can't get a certain shot, um, or they have some kind of religious background, and something signed saying they're a part of a religion. I think that might be a problem, because you got all these people who are vaccinated, and you have some people claiming they're a part of religions, and even anti-vax people were doing that, and their kids were exposed to all these sicknesses, possibly. And so what if one of those people comes on the campus infected? And so that's just another scare. But it's something to think about. I'm thinking, like, it's just like if you have a kid that isn't vaccinated, and they happen to come with some polio or something, and then other kids somehow, they, even though they're vaccinated, there might be some kid that might get a reaction from that kid that isn't, inoculated. So they require you to have some forms of protection. So, and then there's the fear of these shots, So it's a mixed bag of craziness, if you ask me. And so look at this article. Going back to this article, it's no wonder we see more tension, more racial violence, more hate crimes, more mass shootings because of the uncertainty of this whole thing in the big picture. And so, having said this, I'm gonna let this go. I don't know what's gonna occur out of the final decision, but I would say this: he has. I'm thinking he has a slim chance of having the they have a sort of a slim chance of having the trial overturned. But even having that amount of chance, it puts you on edge because you never know where in which way this is gonna go. Who are the judge? Who are the final the people who are going to have the final say so on all of this? There are people that are angry um, because of the verdict. They think that he shouldn't serve any time. So you have mixed reactions. You have people on the opposite side who are um, in opposition of all of this, and so that I believe is what's spawning the hate crimes, spawning the racial violence and divide more so than anything. Um, and then you have, politicians that are being attacked on all levels. I believe the openings that have happened really fast here in California is a result of the attacks that were made on Gavin Newsom, the governor, because of the lockdowns. They say California has the lowest numbers, but I wonder, do we really have the lowest numbers? Or is this just a cover up? And I'm just saying this: is this just a cover up because of the fact that they attacked Gavin Newsom so bad and they were trying to get him booted out of there and recall him? I think they were going to try to put Villanueva, if I believe that's what his name was, to try to run for his spot. And I believe he's a Democrat, but I don't know if that's going to actually happen. I believe they say because of the numbers showing that California is really low in terms of COVID, that might be an indicator to keep Gavin Newsom in his position. But I believe that the openings are a result of the people who had came forward complaining about Gavin Newsom because of the homeless issues and the lockdowns and all of the landlords who were really angry. They were actually suing um, because they too said that they were struggling keeping their properties, even being able to maintain because of the fact that people were basically getting away with not having to pay any rent at all. And so this is really scary. So it's just it's just chaos. It's full of chaos. I feel like something else is going to happen. I don't know if it's something necessarily positive or not, but I feel like on either level, even I feel like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't with this trial. If they come to a conclusion that he is to serve time and that the verdicts stand, and then they're going to validate these verdicts and say yes, he is going to be convicted and this is our final say so, blah blah blah. It's going to spark more racial resentment and hatred from people who already are doing this. And then if it goes the other way, there could be this horrible riot that could erupt in anger and despair, and then it will once again feel is that we've taken maybe 3 or 4 steps forward in some directions on having the conversation about policing, and then we could easily jump 5 to 6 steps backwards and starting all over again, or at least seeing that it was never in our favor to begin with, as we already feel that way or some type of way about this whole thing. And then seeing all of the other things that are happening to these other people, I just wonder, where you wonder where all of this is going to lead. But I will say this, no matter how it goes, there's going to be people that are going to be unhappy. And I don't think it will really result in all sides seeing things as a relief, because I feel like there are people that don't want change, no matter how we try to move forward towards it. Um, so having said that, I'm going to let this video go. So all we can do is really wait to see how this outcome is going to show itself or rear its head, and very soon. The other thing, evictions. What's going to happen to all these people who are being evicted? That's the other thing. Evictions, they are happening like rapid here in South Los Angeles. There's been a lot of eviction, a lot of eviction. That doesn't sit well with what's going on either. So having said that, you're trying to do all these great things with homelessness. Now you have a new population of homelessness, and it doesn't necessarily mean people living in on the streets. People might have to live doubled up, tripled up on top of relatives. Maybe they have to live in smaller living situations or hotels, motels. Maybe they might end up on the street or living out of their car, living out of their car, living place to place, or couch surfing more often. So having said that, like, comment, subscribe, and thank you for listening.